I understand that God exists within me. This was like my biggest realization ever on my spiritual journey. Wow, okay. And that's when it all started coming together. My spirit is the only thing that I have that will never cease to exist. Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Melissa the Divine. Today's video is going to be about how I started my spiritual journey. For me, it happened in stages, so I'm gonna break it down for you guys exactly how it happened for me, my experience with it. So let's just get right into it. Before we do, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up because we're trying to grow over here. We'll first start off by defining what I think a spiritual journey is. To me, a spiritual journey is just like when you start to see yourself and view yourself as a divine being, when you start to see not just your physical body but also your spiritual body, when you start to see yourself as like a lowercase g god or goddess, kind of seeing yourself beyond all the smoke and mirrors, seeing yourself beyond all the things that like society and the world tells you to be and tells you that you have to like, and seeing your true, most authentic self, your true essence, and just seeing once again the divinity within you. So that's what I think a spiritual journey is. But for me, how I started, I would say, like I said, it started and it continued in phases. I'll start by saying I always have had a spiritual connection ever since I was a kid. I don't really know how to explain it, but I grew up Catholic. So I grew up like believing in God, believing in Jesus, go to church essentially every Sunday. My dad almost became a priest before he had me. So he wasn't even gonna have kids. Religion and like God has always been in my life. As a kid, I just always had like spiritual experiences. I would have really intense dreams as a kid that almost like, it's like looking back now, I believe in past lives. That's like a whole separate video for a different day, but it kind of seemed like just like past life stuff because I would have super vivid and like dark dreams as a young girl, like dreams about places burning down, dreams about just really insane stuff. Whenever I need help with something, I'm like, God, Jesus, please help me get through this, help me achieve this, help me acquire this. And I would be like, I pray I don't get any nightmares tonight. So when I actually prayed for my dreams to get better, they actually got worse. I was scared of praying at that point because I'm like, no, I prayed for my dreams to get better, but they actually got scarier. So I kind of was scared about praying for a little while until I got a little bit older and just it came back to me. It was something that I just did and it kind of came naturally to me. My parents, like, we would pray before dinner and stuff, but it's not like they were telling me like how to pray necessarily and things like that, but they would kind of emphasize prayer. So that was my first initial experience. When I say I have a spiritual experience as well, I just always kind of felt like God or some spirit or being outside of me was always telling me it's gonna be okay, you're gonna live an amazing life. As a kid, I just always had huge dreams and plans, and it almost felt like they were coming from the outside in a way. It almost felt like someone telling me my destiny when I was younger. And I know that sounds, you guys are probably like, what? I know that sounds crazy, but like as a kid, had this voice or like this presence telling me that's what you're meant to do, this is what you're supposed to do, you are meant to be like on the screen, you're meant to be seen, you're meant to be heard. So I would just get these certain messages and downloads from a very young age, and I just had that spiritual relationship just early on. In high school, I didn't really have a good relationship with God. Like my parents would push going to church on me, and church just never really felt like, I just never felt a connection. I always felt a disconnect in the church that I would go to. I'm not connecting with this. This isn't resonating with me vibes. And I kind of always felt like that, even growing up. Like I said, I had that relationship with God and I had that spiritual connection, but church was always like this weird place for me to go that I didn't really like. High school years, I just feel like I started hanging out with people who just weren't religious like I grew up and was used to. So they kind of made me have a different perspective. They didn't really believe in God and they wouldn't really talk about God, and God wasn't really part of their decisions or anything. And I was like, interesting perspective, and they just kind of made me think of a different side. So during that time, I think that my relationship with God just wasn't as strong. So I wouldn't say I fully stopped believing, but I just kind of grew distant from God during like my high school years. Freshman year of college comes up. For one, I went to college in the same town that I went to high school. I have a big university in the town I grew up in, and it's legit like less than a mile away from my high school. So I really didn't want to go there because I'm really adventurous and I wanted to go somewhere else. I wanted to experience something completely different after high school, but my dad is a professor at the university, so it just made sense for me to go. He's like, we'll pay for you to live in the dorms just so you can still get that college experience. And I'm really grateful that they gave me that because I needed that time alone and away from my family to like find myself. And that's really what kickstarted my spiritual journey, was me being in the dorms all by myself. I didn't have a roommate in my first semester of college. I had no roommate in the dorm, she just ended up not showing up. So I decked out my dorm. I was living my best life at first. Like I said, I went to high school in the same town, so I still had my friends from high school. We would link up in my dorm, get drunk, turn up, watch movies, go party like on campus, and then come back and sleep there. Like I was having a lot of fun, honestly, the beginning part of my freshman year. And then I slowly started to grow really anxious. I go to a really big school. We have 50,000 students at my school, so it's just insane. And I had lectures that were like 300 people. Like you walk into a room and there's 300 other people there. And that was my first time being around that many people so often. And I started to realize a lot of insecurities that I had. I started to be like, whoa, I'm comparing myself to this person. I'm comparing myself to that person. I just started to feel really inadequate. I would just be in my head, not even paying attention to the lecture, just anxious about everything around me. That second semester, I actually had a roommate move in, but I was super depressed. And I thought I would be fun having a roommate, and it was nothing to do with her. But I was just really depressed. Like I would be crying in the shower, just like something just felt wrong. Like I could not put my finger on what was wrong with me, but I just felt like everything was going wrong. I just felt like nothing was going right. I was so anxious all the time. I just felt depressed. And this is my first time in my life I really could say I felt like depressed. All before then, I was like a happy-go-lucky person. You can ask anyone. But looking back now, I definitely was using like toxic positivity. I was not allowing myself to feel all of my emotions. I would just kind of put on a mask, you could say. This is when my relationship with God kicked back in. And this is when I really started like praying again. This is when I was like, God, please help me, because I don't know what to do. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm always anxious. I just like, life is terrible. Like, I just hate this. Being depressed for me was super weird. It was super off. I knew for sure like something was wrong. Like it was official. I keep praying, I keep praying, I keep praying. And then someone tells me about the therapy services that my school offers. So I decide to get a university therapist. So I go see this therapist and I'm like, yes, like let's do it. Let's go to therapy. Let's see what's up. My friend had started seeing a therapist also. So that kind of motivated me too. Like, okay, it's time. The signs are telling me, go do this, go get a therapist. I get my therapist, I meet her. She's super nice. She was amazing. And she's the first person who introduced me to journaling. So this was the beginning of 2019. Like whenever you have feelings, like I want you to go home today and I want you to just journal how you're feeling. And I was like, okay, like this is something I never done before. Like, the test that I did in order to get the therapist was really eye-opening too. It was like asking super deep questions, and it asked me like, how much anxiety do you feel? How bad is it? It was a super inclusive, intensive test that they gave me that asked a bunch of different questions. It made me realize, wow, I'm like more depressed than I thought, and it was putting names to certain feelings that I was going through. So I was like, okay, like I probably need to be here. One of the questions was, have you ever experienced trauma? And I answered yes, because I had been through trauma before. I had experienced it in my childhood. But this was the first time anyone had asked me that question. This was the first time someone had like phrased it in that way. And that just like opened so many doors to me, because that was something I really had not acknowledged and had buried for essentially my whole childhood and like my whole teens. So that was really eye-opening. And then I got my therapist, I talked to her, and I probably only saw her like 5 times, in all honesty. I tried to be consistent, but I just think at that time, I was not ready to go that deep. And around this time, I also started being friends with 2 people. I joined a group of 2 friends, and like we became the 3 Musketeers essentially. And this is another part to the story, another piece of the pie. I realized when I first started becoming friends with them, something told me, and this is when I started like learning what my intuition was, something told me that these people were not gonna be my friends for a long time. I don't know why, but I just got that feeling. And I kind of just ignored some red flags, because at the time, this is when I was going through like my anxiety and my depression, and I just kind of felt alone and isolated. And here were 2 people that like wanted to be friends, and I'm like, bet, they seemed cool. And I was like just really excited to be friends with them. I was looking for any positive sign at this time, so I pretty much ignored the negative ones. Fast forward to the pandemic. The pandemic happened. So now this is about a year after I've had my therapy session, the first time I've had to acknowledge that I've had trauma. And now I'm in the midst of the pandemic. My school shuts down. I do school online now. Like, it was just really a confusing time. I'm spending so much time alone. And during my dorm times, I learned too that I could not spend time alone. Spending time alone to me was really scary. I had to be with my thoughts. I didn't like myself. I didn't like the way my mind worked. During the pandemic, now I'm alone again. I'm spending much more time alone. This is when I really started my spiritual journey. This is when I was like, I full-fledged went into my spiritual journey. And what happened was, I just had all this time alone. I just was reading stuff. I was like looking certain things up. I just had so much alone time that I was able to explore the different parts of myself that I feel like I really liked and enjoyed. I had my practice of journaling from my therapist that I had gotten. So at this point I was journaling, I'll write my feelings. I think on Instagram, I discovered this Instagram account called Commanding Life, and they would just like give positive affirmations and like positive messages. I did a lot of research during 2020 on like my zodiac. I always was into zodiacs. I always thought those were really interesting. And I remember the app came out, CoStar. So I used CoStar a bunch, and it would give you all these messages and tell you like how things are happening in the universe and things like that. So I found that really interesting, and I just would go down rabbit holes of like, ooh, what's my North Node? What's my Venus? What's my Mars? What does this mean? So going down those rabbit holes would get me into other rabbit holes like manifesting and how to manifest your desires and how to find your higher self and meditation. And all of this was just so new to me. Once again, I grew up with religion, so I was not used to this other side of it, but this was the side that always intrigued me. Like I said, zodiacs to me, like in high school, I would look that stuff up and I would believe it. I just was able to explore a different part of myself that I never had. And at this time, I had my own place. I just had so much time to chill and just figure stuff out. Like I'm watching YouTube videos on YouTube videos. I started learning about like the truths. Like during the pandemic, y'all know certain things were just coming out where it was like, what? The veil was being completely like lifted. Things were getting exposed like nobody's business. We're finding out about all these crazy things that go on like in the government, that go on in all these places. So I was questioning everything at this time. And I was learning about colonization. And I remember them talking about how they pushed religion onto Africans back in the day. And I started to think, wow, like my parents told me they had missionaries. Like back home in Malawi, they had white missionaries telling them what religion to believe. And I started being like, wait, the religion they're telling us isn't our native religion. And I started to be like, wow, like all these downloads were coming to me. Like, no, there's no way these people push this religion on us and we just take it and believe it. Like, no, what were we doing before Catholicism came? Like, what was happening before these missionaries came? I'm learning so much. I'm really resonating with what I'm learning. I'm journaling still. I'm figuring myself out more. I'm learning about my chart. When you read deep into like astrology, it really talks a lot about your mannerisms, the way you act in the world, the way you behave in certain situations. And it kind of made me question those things about myself. Like, how do I show up in the world? How do I behave? What are my mannerisms? So coming to learn that, I started to discover myself more. I started to learn more about myself, and I started to tap into that part of me that was just like divine. That was really just like spiritual. Like, we are all connected. And I started tapping into that feeling more and more. I did my journalings, I started meditating. And when I started meditating, this is when I was like, whoa, I realized so much about myself. I realized my negative thoughts that I was going through. I realized limiting beliefs that were popping up for me. Meditation was huge. The pandemic for me was really eye-opening. Then what happened was my relationship with my friends that I was telling you guys about, the Three Musketeers. I found out one of the friends was really fake and like just on some bullshit behind my back the whole time, never really liked me, but was like pretending in my face and just like on some weird shit. I find this out and I was like, dang, my intuition been told me that. My intuition been told me something was off with her, and my intuition been told me we would not be friends. So I was like, huh, what is that feeling? So I started looking up intuition. I'm like, what does that mean? What's that about? And I started learning that about myself. Like, yes, we have this intuition, that voice that's telling us. This is when I just started really connecting spiritually by journaling. I would go through a lot of prayer. This is when I started to understand like my ancestors. Although they've passed, they're there just like beyond the veil, you could say, and they're here to support me. They're here to love me. They're doing work behind the scenes for me. So this was like a huge self-discovery journey. I started to really dig deep into my roots. I started questioning everything at this time. No, what were we doing before Catholicism came? Like, what was happening before these missionaries came? What were the practices? And something told me they were much more like the practices I was doing, like using Palo Santo. I used that to like clear my energy. I remember when I first got Palo Santo, I started with sage though, because everyone says get sage, right? And then I learned, wait, no, that's like taking away from certain native tribes. I remember the instant feeling I had when I used Palo Santo. It felt spiritual, it felt energetic, and it felt just like energies were being cleansed. And I was like, whoa, like this is a really spiritual moment. So that helped me realize that I wanted to use tools, but you don't necessarily need tools. You know what I mean? Like, I discovered the biggest parts of my spiritual journey without any tools at all. Just Google, finding books at the store. That was a big part of the learning and unlearning process, because for me, it was unlearning the beliefs that had been pushed on me about religion, about what we're supposed to believe. It's about if you do this, you're going to hell, you know? And that never sat right with me. I was like why do you guys make God out to be like he's like this mean, spiteful being that's just gonna like strike down? I'm like, the relationship I have with God is very loving and it's very supportive and it's good, positive vibes. It's not like, don't do this or I'm gonna strike you down, I'm gonna banish you from the white gates of heaven. So I'm like, this, it doesn't sit right with me. Like, no. I understand that God exists within me. And this was like my biggest realization ever on my spiritual journey, was that as much as God is like the omnipresent outside of us, God is also within us, because God created us, God made us. So how is a piece of God not within us? How are we not like mini lowercase g gods and goddesses if God made us? And that's when I was like, wow, okay, that makes sense. And I started doing like research on like ancient Egypt and stuff like that, how they had goddesses and how they had certain things. And it just really resonated with me. This is stuff that's always intrigued me, but I never went too far in because it's like, ooh, like, you know, it's kind of taboo. I started doing yoga, and yoga is really good for me because I have like a lot of tension in my body sometimes. So yoga really helps me stretch it out and even out my like emotions and like how I'm feeling physically. I started manifesting. I started realizing I'm powerful. Like, I'm a goddess, you know what I mean? Like, I have that spiritual power to manifest and bring the things that I want in my life towards me. I'm like, ooh, like, yes, I'm divine. And that's where Melissa Divine finally emerged from. I realized that I was divine, and all of us are. When I say Melissa the Divine, I don't want you guys to take it like offensively. I don't think I'm above anyone with that name that I have, but I realized I'm divine, and I'm like, wow, okay. And that's when it all started coming together. I'm like, this feels like the big plan that voice was always telling me when I was a kid. It feels like that big plan is kind of unveiling now, and I'm just surrendering. I'm just going with the flow. That's a huge tip that I have, is to surrender. Another tip that I have, meditation is great. Yoga is great. Journaling is great. Those are the 3 tips that I would say do right now. Like, start like tomorrow if you want to start your spiritual journey. Another tip that I have is really go within on this journey. Like, that's the biggest part for me. By the way, follow me on Instagram. I give great tips and advice on like spirituality and mindfulness on there. Let this journey be from within. Like, allow yourself to guide yourself. You don't always need someone to tell you what to do. You don't always need someone to tell you this is how it is or this is how it shouldn't be. Allow your true self to come out. Like, listen to your inner voice, listen to that part of you, and like really get to know yourself. That's the biggest part of your spiritual journey, and getting to know the divinity within you. That spiritual part of me can never die. That's the part of me that lives forever. These things might have happened to my physical body, to my emotional body. They might have even tried to attack my spiritual, but at the end of the day, my spirit is the only thing that I have that will never cease to exist. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. That is how I started my spiritual journey. I know I was kind of rambling a lot, but don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.